So hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. Thanks for joining. This session is about PowerApps and best practices and governance for PowerApps. So I hope you find it interesting what I will present my own experiences with PowerApps and the governance topic, which is a hot one, especially for most of our customers. So my name is Toni Pohl. I'm from Vienna in Austria, and I'm an IT consultant. I'm also an MVP for Azure and Office development. And I'm working with the PowerApps since the, very first hour, I would say. And again, this session is about my best practices and experiences. So thanks for the organizers to TeamFest to be part of this wonderful event here, this community event. And I'm happy to answer any questions during the session or afterwards, as Sharon said. Okay, here you find my contact data on the title slide here. You can reach me very easily via Twitter, and I have the contact information in the end as well. Okay, let's start with my agenda here. So let me switch to my PowerPoint deck, which is here. And my agenda, first I want to talk a little bit about Power Platform management. So how can you manage applications and flows in the Power Platform environment? Some typical use cases, when should you use or when could you use Power Apps, and when maybe it's a better idea to have a custom solution for a Power App. I want to talk about governance, what possibilities you have in here. So for example, we will see some PowerShell, and we have a look at the Center of Excellence, where we find a full stack of possibilities to manage our own applications, our own environments, and our flows. So with that, let's start with a very short overview. I'm sure you're all familiar with that slide here. It's just a very short reminder for people who are new to the Power Platform. Power Platform consists of Power BI, of Power Apps, which means you can create your own custom applications, while Power BI is mostly, or is for the visualization of the data you have in a data source. We have Power Automate, or formerly known as Flow, to combine or to transport data between, let's say, for example, Power Apps and my data source or any other data sources. And with Ignite 2019, there came the Power Virtual Agents, which are also a great way to create bots without coding into your own, let's say, environments again. All these services in Microsoft 365 are based or have a common ground, which is the data connectors, which connect the data from the data source to your service, which is the AI builder you can use to create your own bot. And the common data service allows to create your own, let's say, entities, or to use predefined entities in your own applications to make your life easier. But that's a different scenario. So this is just a very short overview what's included in the Power Platform. So how can you organize your applications, your flows, or your agents? Well, typically in the Power Platform, this is backed up by Dynamics. We have an environment. An environment holds all the data in its database, which are flows, Power Apps. These are connectors, what we saw before. And for example, these are also policies like data loss prevention policies. So everything you do is always contained in such an environment. So how does this look like in real life here? Well, we have, first of all, multiple environments. And if I switch now to my browser, which is here, and I go to the Power Apps environment here to make PowerApps.com, you see the environments here in the top right corner. And you can see here multiple environments defined. So one of them is the dev environment. And if I look at the apps that are located in my dev environment, there are these applications, demo apps, something, blah, blah, blah. And if I look to my default environment and to my applications, for example, there are different apps in here. So this is a very important part when talking about governance and management of the Power Platform, that you're familiar with these environments. So by default, you'll land, if you navigate to the PowerApps.com URL, you land at makePowerApps.com, and you switch to the environment where you want to create your application in or your flow in. So we have the applications in here, we have the flows stored in that environment. So obviously this takes a moment to load here. So there's just one flow in that environment. And we have the data connectors. So every connector creates a connection, and the connection here goes to the data source in behind. So for example, I have a custom connector here that's called TP salary calculator. I have some other connectors, and I see the status of the connectors. Am I able to communicate with that connector, with that data that's stored in here, or is there a problem? If there's a problem, like here, obviously, I can click on fix a connection and look or re-authenticate over however I connect to that SQL Server database, to the SharePoint site, to OneDrive, to Microsoft 365, and so on. So how can you manage these connectors? Well, if you are a Power Apps administrator, you can go to the admin center, which is also in here. I just want to show a shortcut. That's the Power Platform Admin Center. That's a very useful URL. And in this Power Platform Admin Center, you can manage these environments. So the environments are important because they rely on the storage capacity that's available in the Office 365 tenant, and it allows you to configure who has access to that. An important feature in here is, if I go to my gear icon here in the top right corner, and I go to the Power Platform settings, that you should, as first step, say who is able to create environments. And usually in your organization, you want to restrict that. So that's my first recommendation. Go to the Power Platform settings in here as a Power Platform administrator and say, not everyone can create environments, but only specific people, which means you can define a group and say, okay, every person in that group or every person with specific permission has the permission to create such an environment. And the same goes here for trial environments. We have, I think, 4 or 5 different types of environments. We come to that maybe later. So this is a very important step. Usually you should set that to only allow the power to the creation of environments just for specific administrators. Okay, the second thing here, when I go to such an environment like the demo environment, every environment is hosted in a specific region. So in my case, I'm located in Europe. So I selected Europe as my data region, so the data does not leave the data center there. But for example, you can see I've started very early with the Power Platform, which was somewhere in 2016. At that time, there was not even environments existing or just in the background. So this was, when I opened that, it was upgraded. It's now called At Work Upgrade, and it's still in the US. But otherwise, my recommendation is choose the location where most of your users are. So let's have a look at the dev environment here. What can we do here? First of all, we can edit it. We see just an overview here. Who is allowed to create applications in that environment, for example. If I click on edit, you can see there's a security group behind it. I called it At Work PowerApps, and you can select the security group here. So that's my next recommendation. Always define who is able to create applications in that environment. Also, you can see that you can change the properties here, like the name and so on. The next thing, you can switch that environment between production and sandbox. So if I go back to my environments here, you will see the type here is sandbox or production. So sandbox is a little bit more, let's say, limited here, but you can change that anytime by convert it here. You can also do backups of the environment, which is also very useful because it includes everything, all the resources that are in here. So for example, if we want to see the flows that are existing in that environment, I can also navigate to the flows here, and I will see what kind of flows are in that environment. So again, the environments are the key for your management of the Power Platform. So what happens if you, for example, create a new Power App in a SharePoint site? So let me show you that quickly. So I go to my session here, and I have a SharePoint site that's called Demo. And this is just a custom list here. And you have the Power Apps integrated here and the Power Automate in here. So for example, you can customize the form. So if I go on this record here, Lenovo ThinkPad, that's a device order application that writes information to that list here. You will see that customize that experience here with a Power App. So what happens if you do this? Well, all of these Power Apps that you create from a SharePoint site, for example, are hosted in the default environment. You don't see them in the management, but they are stored in the default environment. And there's some specifics about the default environment, which means this environment here, so which is this one, the default here. If I click into this here, this environment cannot be, let's say, restricted that nobody can see it or work with it. So the strategy of Microsoft here is to say, well, everybody has access to the default environment if he has a license, and every SharePoint Power App you create will be created in here. So usually a good recommendation from my perspective is to rename this default environment to something like Playground or Common Playground or something like this, to ensure, well, if you have Power Apps or flows in production, they should maybe not be in the default environment except the SharePoint ones, but you should create your own environment. Let's say that's my environment for this, or that's my environment with that purpose, like the Center of Excellence, where I created an own environment, and so on. So that's usually a very good, let's say, recommendation to first have a look at the environments and the permissions in here. Also create your own security group and say, okay, only these people have access to this specific environment. Again, the user then has to switch between the environments, and to transfer an application, you have to, you can export it and import it, but there's no direct, let's say, I want to move that application to this other environment here. Okay, with that very short introduction here to environments, see how to use or when to use specific applications. So I switch back to my PowerPoint here in this window. I'm now working with two wonderful screens here. So what is a good option to use Power Apps? So imagine you create your own environment, you define all the rules to say, okay, I want to have specific security settings on an environment. Now let's come to the apps. When is it a good idea to create a Power App? And I have created this overview slide here, and I just want to go through that very briefly, because the first thing you should consider is who shall has access to my Power App I want to create. So first of all, every user here needs to have a work account, which means the user must be in my tenant, in my Office 365 tenant. He must authenticate with his work account. Secondly, every user that is using a Power App must have a license for Power Apps. Well, there are free licenses for Flow and for Power Apps, but if you want to create or modify Power Apps, of course, you need to have a valid license for that. The next part where there's often a confusion is, well, I have a database with, or SharePoint site with 5,000 records. I want to create a Power App and want to enable my users to use that Power App to modify these items in here. Well, the standard connectors have a restriction to reduce the number of items they deliver to usually 500 records, or for SharePoint server, for example, up to 2,000, but there is a limit. So it always depends on the connector how many data records you can load into your Power App, or you can see in your Power App. So that's also important to know. If you say, well, I have a Power App that creates, let's say, a maintenance plan for machines in my factory or something, and someone with his mobile phone goes through this factory site and says, okay, this machine has this status and this machine has that status, you won't have a lot of records, a lot of items to manage in here. But let's say if you are using IoT and you have a machine that sends you data, let's say every second, you get a lot of records in a very short time. So in that case, you should really consider thinking about, should I use a Power App for this purpose, or is it maybe a better approach to create a custom mobile app or any other a web application, or to filter the records down to, let's say, just the last records, let's say the last 100 records or 500 records or something. Again, here my recommendation is use the standard connectors because they're integrated in the default, in the standard Power Apps licenses. There are also premium connectors, for example, for connecting to SAP or other sources. So when it comes down to your data sets, you say, I want to access SharePoint, I want to access OneDrive or Excel or Azure Active Directory. So then the standard connectors really do their job, and it's a recommendation to use a Power application in here. The next recommendation is about simple apps. So Microsoft also has limits for PowerApps. So I think they recommend not to use more than, let's say, 500 controls per application. So every object, every label, every text box, every button, etc., is such an object. So if the application is too complex, and I have an example for that later, it's maybe a better approach to say I want to split the applications into multiple applications, or make small applications, or I can transport data with flow to the next application or something like this. Also, the application itself shouldn't be too complex. So the dependencies or permissions within the application shouldn't be too complex. But another reason for using PowerApps from my perspective is offline scenarios. Because the PowerApps framework provides you a method to create offline Power applications very easily, just by load data and save data of collections, which means they're perfect for having a mobile device like a tablet or a phone, go to the customer or to somewhere where I need to collect data, enter the data, go back to my home or office, or when I'm connected again, and then I can synchronize that data to my data source. So that's a very useful scenario, and this is really a recommendation from my side. If you have such simple offline scenarios, consider using PowerApps because it's very easy to manage. Okay, and yeah, the last part here, when talking about environments and when should you use Power applications, it's also important to train your users to say, okay, when you create a Power App, please ensure you're in the right environment. This is how it works. You can use standard connectors. These are limited to 500 or 2000 records. Look that your applications are not too complex, and so on. So this is a very short overview, and my recommendations, and in the top right corner, you can see the green checkbox, which is my best practice, and I use that checkbox here for my slides here when I say, okay, this, please think about that when creating Power Apps or flows. Okay, a sample for such an application would be, let's go back to my browser here. For example, if I go to my dev environment and to my applications, let's close the environments. This one here, device order demo. Maybe some of you already know this application. It's a kind of best practice. So I have a device order. I say, okay, for this location here or that location, I have these devices available, and I want to order such a device for my as a workplace machine or so, and I can select some of these items here, and then I can compare them like a kind of a card, and then I say, okay, I make a decision. I want to have that notebook, for example, and I get an error message, which I ignore here, and I select this and say, okay, please send this request to my manager with a flow, and the manager then has to approve or deny this. So that's a typical example of a very simple Power application. Okay, with that, let's go to our recommendations when it's maybe not such a good idea to use Power Apps. You can see the red X here in the top right corner. So first of all, if your users don't have a work account in your organization, or they don't get a license. So for example, if you're working with a vendor and you say, okay, the vendor with 1,000 people shall have access to my resources, and they create a Power App and some flows behind that, it's maybe not a good idea to say, I do it with Power Apps. The next thing from my side, premium connectors. Well, of course you can use them, but maybe not for every user, but just for key users. So if you have, for example, an SAP system, an HR system, any other let's say systems you have in your organization, or you need the HTTP connector, which is from my perspective like a Swiss knife, you use more or less every time. So it really depends on the scenario. So for these connectors, you need to have a premium connector, and you have to have a license for that. So keep that also in mind. The number of records are limited, and also the connectors are just for standard and premium users. Complex apps, I've talked about that before, just to say, well, if you have an application that has, let's say, a lot of permissions in it, you have some complexity switching between the controls, showing controls, etc. So that can be complex, or let me put this way, it can be a lot of effort. So again, complex applications maybe should not be created with PowerApps. And also performance. So PowerApps are a great framework. You can use them out of the box. You don't have to care about the technology behind and all the management and so on. We come to that with the governance then. But performance is also an important factor. So if you have an application that works with a lot of data, that needs really very good performance, has a lot of screens, maybe you consider other applications. Just that you have an idea what I'm talking about when not to use PowerApps. We had a project here and we considered, shall we do it in PowerApps or shall we do a custom web application? And it turned out that the project was relatively complex. So for example, you can see here, there are multiple select drop downs here. I have a lot of data in here with fields, with lookups, etc. And the thing here is we have permissions. So depending on the user that's logged in here, I see specific menus or boxes here or not. So we went the way that we developed a custom application, a web form. Well, actually, it's a web application with Azure Active Directory authentication and using a database behind a SQL database and tools like ESP.NET Core and Angular and so on. So this application here, it turned out that the customer wanted to have a history where he said, well, I want to see the changes between the fields, who modified what, and I want to have a kind of a marking of the changes and so on. And I want to have outputs. I want to have with Wik editors in here. I want to have reporting. I want to have PDFs, etc. So of course, you can do everything with that in PowerApps as well. But my recommendation again here is, if it's too complex, think about it if it's really worth it to do the job with PowerApps. They are great for small things. If it's too complex, I would recommend to go maybe to really evaluate the project and see if there are other solutions for that. Okay, so this was more or less the first part of my session here. So now I want to talk a little bit about governance. How can you use governance in your organization? So what is governance? Well, it's a process to, let's say, monitor and control what kind of, let's say, functionality, data, processes are used in the organization. So if we talk about Microsoft 365 here, it's often like this construction site. So Office 365 offers a lot of services. And you start here as an administrator and say, well, I see there's a lot of things going on, a lot of services I can use. I want to put governance over the services here. So the basic Microsoft 365 governance is divided in multiple types of governance, let's say sections. So we have governance for teams and groups. We have governance for SharePoint. Of course, we can also do our ACM projects here. Identity governance, who has access to what resource, who logged in, what are risky sign-ins, and so on. Everything in there should be covered. What about governance for stream, for example, and live events, and so on. So what we are interested in, we want to talk about the Power Platform governance here. So let me show you my best practices for the Power Platform governance here. So this slide also has the green check mark on the right side. So first of all, check the Power Platform Administration Center, what we did in here, and develop an environment strategy here. So think about who shall has access to what. Maybe you have a different business department or so, where you say, okay, everything for the department, like the HR, for example, is secret and shouldn't be seen by other users, and so on. Also, policies for connectors. Let me show you that quickly. So if I go back to the Power Platform Admin Center and I go here to the data policies, we can define data policies, and you can see I've already defined some, so 3. And just to show you that quickly here, if I go to edit policy, I give the policy a name, and here are the connectors I can use. So currently we have these 3 categories here. Non-business, where all the connectors are in here. like I can of course search, like maybe there's something others like Microsoft something in here, and I can move these connectors here to the business side to say, okay, that's an important connector or that's a blocked connector here. So you simply select the connectors here. By default, my recommendation here would be allow the Microsoft connectors as a business connector, and then really decide what kind of connectors should be business or shouldn't be business here. So let me remove the filter here. For example, my business connectors here are approvers, of course, Azure AD, blob storage, event grid, and so on. Maybe Twitter isn't a business critical application or connector, so I could move it to non-business here and say, okay, this is a not so important connector. And again, you see the connectors here have a kind of category to say, okay, I cannot share data in my application between connectors from type business and non-business. And of course, the blocked connectors I simply cannot manage here. So that would be the part where I define which kind of connector shall be used in that policy. And then I can say, apply this to all environments or just to multiple environments. So in my case, I have these environments available. So I go to edit policy. I have only added this policy here to these two environments, and then more or less you're done. So that's also an important factor when talking about governance here, to create environments and to create the policies for the connectors, which you can use in here. Okay, with that, let's go back to my other recommendations here. So we have been here at the policies. The next would be activity logs and analytics. So ensure that you turn on the activity logs in the protectionoffice.com center so that we can access that data in the Office 365 storage. So that's also an important step in here. Set up an automation of audit processes, which means you should define what kind of processes are set up in your organization to say, okay, if somebody creates a record in this data source, then something here happens and somebody controls that, like a device order flow or something like this, or typically approval flow or similar, or who did what to find out what happened in your tenant. It's also important to say, to define your makers and champions in your organization, to say, okay, who is responsible for what? Who is responsible for the PowerApps and flows in my development environment? To say, okay, if something happens in here, if I see by audit process or so, okay, somebody accessed the data or deleted the data, so that you can talk to that person and that person is responsible for a specific environment. And one last recommendation here is use the Power Platform Center of Excellence Starter Kit. We will have a look at that in the next minutes. Okay, if you talk about environments, this is a recommendation from Microsoft. I just have it here as a sample to say, okay, how could I organize my environments? Well, by default, you have this, everyone is a maker in the default environment, then you create your own environments here. So for example, what I did, we have a dev environment and say, okay, every developer, please develops his application in this developer environment. But of course, we can also have processes in here to say, we even can use the CI/CD pipeline from Azure DevOps, for example, to automate specific build processes and deployment processes. So this is relatively new. I think this was announced at the last Ignite in the last week or 2 weeks ago. That's also a very interesting topic. But for defining your environments here, you can see you can also do it like here, like create critical project development, critical project test, and then the application or the solution comes into the critical project in here. So just when talking about solutions, let me show you that quickly here. So if I go back to my PowerApps and in my CUE environment, for example, excuse me, you also have a menu here, solutions. And solutions are just a container for multiple resources. And you can see there are some solutions installed here, excuse me. And these solutions here contain, if we look into that, for example, the governance components contain of multiple resources here. So for example, you see the type here, there's some flows in here. there's a model-driven app, there are environment variables here, and so on. So it's a good idea to package multiple components, multiple resources like a Power App. Then the Power App needs 2 flows and maybe some environment variables or something for the flows into a solution. So you can create your own solutions easily by simply clicking new solution, give it a name, and follow that process. And then you create your solution as a package and can distribute that package to someone who deploys it in his environment. So that's also a very cool thing here. Okay, let's go back to my next part here before talking about the Center of Excellence. I want to show you how you can automate with PowerShell here. So the PowerShell module can be installed from the Azure PowerShell gallery, and I have my Visual Studio Code here. And let me show you this install here. So first of all, you would install the module from the PowerShell gallery. There are 2, actually. There's a 3rd one, which also has specific, well, let's say commandlets in it. You can check what kind of version you have installed in here. You will see the scripts on my GitHub site. I will show you that later or put the link at the end. So currently I have installed a specific version of these 2 modules here, for example. So that would be the first part to prepare it. Please be aware that these PowerShell modules are only working for PowerShell version 5.1, and this is why you see here in the top bottom corner, on the bottom corner here, version 5.1. So it's not available with the .NET Core environment here right now. So you have to run it in the context of 5.1, PowerShell version 5.1, but you can also use it in automation accounts, for example. Okay, so this takes a little bit longer. Oh, here we go. So this is the version I've currently installed. So if you want to access the data that's in your Power Platform, you have to log in. And I already have run the login with @PowerApps account. If you want to automate it, you can do it as well. But this doesn't work with MFA. So just to mention that. And let's see how we can access that. So first of all, we want to get the environments here that are existing in this Office 365 tenant. So I can do that with the get admin Power App environment here. And hopefully I'm not timed out. So let's see if this runs. Otherwise, I have to re-authenticate here. So let's see if I see a result. Hopefully soon. I think I have to re-authenticate. Sorry for that. So I run the @PowerApps here again. So I sign in quickly. Multi-factor authentication here. And I have to approve the login with my 2nd factor and my face. So here we go. And let's go back and see if now my get admin environment works. Here we go. So these are all the environments we saw in our Power Platform PowerApps environment. So if you want to work with the default environment, you could say, okay, give me the default environment, which means now I have the default environment in my hand here. And this is the data you see here. So you can see who is it the default environment, where is it located, etc. Or if you want to work with a specific environment, simply use the environment name here. So in my case, I work with that one with the dev environment A19 something. So I simply connect to that environment. Okay, next step, what can I do here? I need to get the environment ID, which means if I go to my environment I think it's called internal, you see that I have a property here that's the ID, and to work with the environment, I just need this rest here. I actually already have it, but if you need to organize it from a list or something, you can simply get the ID here. So now we have it in our hand in the environment ID variable. And now I can say, please give me all the applications that are existing in this environment here. So I simply put all that information into the apps object. And you can see the loading here. And when this is done here, we can simply output it and say, now show me the environments here. So here we are. So these are the environments that are existing in that tenant. Of course, for later purposes, for example, if you want to create a Power BI or something, do your own governance solution for that, you could simply write it to a CSV list here and then go through that and see, okay, this was the last time this application was modified, etc. Okay, these in my case are 12 applications in that environment. So let me check that here. So I go back to my, not to this one, let's switch here to my other dev environment where I'm talking about 2 with PowerShell, go to the applications here. So these are the 12 applications. And there's one specific application like the demo app 4, for example, that belongs to Toni Pohl, where Toni is the owner here. So you often have the scenario that the user creates an application and then the user leaves the organization or is no longer responsible for that application or that flow. So how can you change that? You cannot change it here in the GUI. So there's no way to do it here, but you can do it with PowerShell. So that's a typical use case here. So if I want to do this, so I say I have a demo application 4. So let's run this here. So now I have the application in my hand out of that list here. And now show me the permissions for that application here. And you can see I simply get the application here, and then I say get admin power role assignment, and just show me these columns here and see, okay, this application here is only Toni Pohl, he's the owner of that application. Now I want to change that user, so I need the user ID. In my case, I already have to look that up. Of course, you can do it with the EZ PowerShell or the Azure RM PowerShells, which are outdated. So the EZ PowerShell modules would be perfect. So I say there's a user that's called Bianca, that's her user ID. And first of all, I assign her permissions. So I say, okay, now Bianca shall get access to this application. That's the first step. And the second step here would be, I now change the owner of that application here. So I simply say set admin power app owner. The new owner is my user with that ID for that application here. And with the same mechanism with remove admin power admin roles, I could remove that. So let's check it again here. So what happened with that application? We see that we have now Toni Pohl can view and Bianca Pisani, excuse me, is now the owner of that application. So let's check here in the portal. And we should see, so let me refresh this here. We should see if it was the right application here, that now Bianca Pisani is owner of that application, and that application was modified 32 seconds ago. Okay, with that, let me come to my last part here, just to give you an idea, which is my Center of Excellence governance strategy. So Center of Excellence is a Microsoft add-on for governance on the Power Platform. You can download it here from the Starter Kit download URL, and you get all the information how to install it here in the demo Starter Kit. And my demo here, I want to shorten that a little bit, is you have the environment, you have multiple environments, and the Center of Excellence Starter Kit more or less reads all the data and puts it into a common data system, into a database. And out of that, we can get information like, for example, is the application compliant? I can create a Power BI dashboard, or I get a Power BI dashboard for it. I can create my own applications based on that data out of that CDS with Flow, for example. And we also have nice things in here like notifications if an application is orphaned or something like this. And we have another nice feature that allows me to archive unused applications where I get a notification, and I want to show it that quickly here in my inbox. So for example, something like this here, sorry, actually I wanted to open a mail here and simply move it to the other screen. And this is what you get out from that. For example, you get an approval where you say, okay, well, there's an app that's called User Application App. It has been flagged for archiving. Why is that? It hasn't been modified. It was created some time ago. This is the application, and you can go in here and say decide what action you want to take here. So for whatever reason, I cannot scroll here. So now I have a scroll bar. So let's see. And maybe full screen now works. No. Not really. So here I can say I approve or reject. Maybe this wasn't the best demo. I think I have a lot of older notifications as well, so where it makes more sense that we have, for example, here an application. So I simply move that here to the right side, then it's maybe easier to read here. So you can see I have a bunch of notifications here. This has been flagged for archiving, and then I can say, okay, please archive it or reject it. I don't want to get a reminder anymore, or approve it. What happens if you do this? Well, this lands in a SharePoint site, and I've configured that here somewhere in the, I think it's called COE. And here I have a document library archive. And if you do this, if you run this approval and say, please archive it, you get that application, that Power App or that flow as a zip. MSA app is a zip file in here, and it's removed from your environment. So you can download it, you can redeploy it later, and so on. And you can see I already have done it for some of these applications here, which are no longer in use, or where I decided, well, this was an old data flow, an old operation, old Power App. I no longer need that. Okay, with that, just to complete here, we have this architecture. We saw that. And my next slide here is just how this can look like. So if you configure the Center of Excellence, you have these environment variables where you can define which email address shall be used, where comes the my logo for my company from, and so on. So you can simply go through that. You also get applications, Power Applications, that show you how is it going within your environments, how many environments do you have. You can see, oh, there's a TP demo environment, there's a dev environment. In the dev environment where my cursor is, I have currently 13 apps and I have only 4 flows, but there's another environment where I have more flows than apps, and so on. Who are the most productive users here? So you can see you can switch through this, and this is just one application. You get a bunch of applications in here, and just to show it that also very quickly, I switch back to my COE environment. It's a recommendation to create your own environment here for the Center of Excellence. If you go to the applications, you can see there are some applications in here. And if I go to the Power Platform admin view to do it live here, then you, for example, see this here. And then you can switch through your environment and say, okay, show me all the flows, show me all the apps, show me the connectors. Are there any connectors? Well, there should be some. And you can also export this data to Excel. So analogously to what we did with PowerShell before, we can do it on our own, of course, but you can also use the Center of Excellence as a, let's say, ready-to-use solution. But one thing, be warned, the Center of Excellence is complex. You need to have some knowledge about it. You have to create an application, you have to give permissions, and so on. And it takes some hours. So if you do it for the first time, it will take maybe half a day or maybe a day or so, depending on the speed and if you document what you do. If you do it for the third or fourth time, it takes maybe 2 or 3 hours. So it's complex. It's some effort to create that. Okay, so I'm almost out of time. So just to show some more screenshots here. This is a recommendation at the end. If you plan your governance, you see the green checkmark on the right top corner again. First of all, you should do some analysis. How is it going in your current environment? Do you have existing applications? How should you organize that? How should you create your data loss prevention, and so on? So this would be phase 1. Define how you want to do it in your organization. The second thing here would be implement and configure the Center of Excellence. That's my recommendation, to use that. It's free. It's just some effort to use it, and you get a bunch of information. And I have a link in my PowerPoint deck. I will add that later, where our colleague, or MVP colleague, Paul Kamsik, made a nice video. He showed the steps how to do it. It's available on YouTube as well. And the last part, don't forget the end user adoption, because you have to inform your users, your makers, how they should create your applications, how they should use their flows, what happens if they don't use it, so that you have the Center of Excellence in place, which archives all information, all data, and so on. So that's also an important thing. So to end, here's my summary. First of all, develop the governance plan and the strategy. Choose the governance tools of your choice. There are a lot of tools out there from third-party vendors. There's also, for example, the Power Platform Studio from our colleague John Liu. He created a cool tool for the community that's also very useful as well. Check out the admin center, turn on auditing so that you get access, because the center of access also is using that auditing, for example, and you can use it on your own as well. Use PowerShell for automating some tasks to say, okay, I want to change owners or something like this. I want to reorganize my applications, and use the Center of Excellence starter kit. Okay, with that, my almost last part is, let's connect. If you're interested to connect with me, please simply take a picture of my wonderful barcode here, or connect me via Twitter or LinkedIn or email. And of course, follow TeamsFest. And with that, thanks for for attending this session. I hope it was useful. Please rate the session and enjoy the rest of this wonderful community conference here. So thank you.
Tony, we do just have a couple of questions that have come up during the session, not many, which is why I let you kind of go slightly over time there. But Veronique has asked, how useful is PowerApps PowerShell module in the real world scenarios, or is it better to use the UI still at this time?
Thanks. So from my perspective, I use it really often. So it's a good idea to use the PowerShell modules for such management tasks. So I think it's a cool way to do it, because it simplifies your life.
We've also got a question from Gilbert saying, a question on Power Automate. How and when do we get the run as option? It seems not to be available for all flows.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Actually, honestly, I don't know. I hope it will come soon. Yeah, but again, we have user voice, and I really recommend to use user voice for that if you need a feature and it's simply not there, because sometimes you have workarounds going through an API or something like this, but sometimes you simply have to wait that the option is provided from Microsoft.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I think that's been a really informative session, and we're getting some excellent. We're getting some nice feedback for you there. But if I could just ask people, I will put the URL, there we are, in the chat for you. If you could go back and fill in the feedback for us, it gives us some really useful information to the people organising the event, and also to the speakers themselves, about what you liked, what you would like to see more of, if we went too quickly, if it was too technical, not technical enough, all of those things. Do let us know your thoughts. It's really useful to the team to have that feedback.